Great. Well, hello, everyone. Let's get things kicked off. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Susan Ram, and I lead our publisher and platform go-to-market team here at Upwave. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to our Q2 2021 Masters of Brand Measurement event, The Rise of Retail Media. Please know we're very much looking forward to a time when we can all be together in person, like many of our previous Masters events have been. But for today, we're pleased to host this virtual event and look forward to meeting each of you again in the future in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago. Our Masters of Brand Measurement events are all about promoting thought leadership within our industry, but also providing a network opportunity for folks within our brand-focused community. Today's topic hones in on the rise of retail media. The advertising industry has seen a huge uptick in retail media companies who are not only leveraging their own data to create new channels for advertisers, but are also creating their own ad networks to provide value for brands beyond their own media ecosystems. What does this evolving landscape mean for the modern marketer? We've gathered a diverse group of experts from agencies, brands, and platforms to give a well-rounded perspective on the current and future state of retail media. A quick reminder to some of you, we are Upwave, the brand intelligence platform. We offer an always-on software solution to plan, measure, and optimize brand outcomes. If you don't know us, please reach out and we'd be happy to tell you more. A huge thank you to both our panelists and to all of you, our audience, for joining today. Without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to our SVP of Customer Success and Analytics, John Stewart. John will get our panel introduced and our topics for discussion kicked off. John, we're all yours.
Thank you, Susan. And thanks to all of you once again for attending. We got a great group of panelists that are going to offer their expertise in the area of retail, media, measurement, and in particular, the rise of retail as media. So I always start with this, and I think it's very important to call out that branding is in our DNA here in Upwave. And we've long been fans of the Binet and Field study out of the UK that found that brand building is the main driver of long-term growth, and that without brand strengthening, growth will be weaker, activation will be weaker, pricing power will not improve, and profitability growth will be severely reduced. And we believe this is even more so with the rise, more so important with the rise of retail media, and that brand and retail can actually go hand in hand. So we're excited to have presenters today who are experts in these areas. And without further ado, let's meet our panelists. First, we have Matt Carson, Media Director at the Clorox Company.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet you.
And Dan Gross, VP of Analytics, Universal McCann.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here and to talk about retail media.
Julie Van Ullen, Managing Director, Rakuten.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Van Ullen. I head up sales and I'm the Managing Director of Rakuten, which is the largest rewarded retail platform in the US. And I'm so excited because we work with brands, retailers, platforms. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And last but not least, Michael Green, VP Global Product Solutions, Criteo.
Hi, everybody. I lead strategy for our retail media business at Criteo. For those of you unfamiliar with Criteo's retail media business, we power an open retail media ecosystem of over 100 retailers globally and thousands of brands. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Well, let's just jump right into it. And I think as a as a measurement company, the one thing that's near and dear to my heart are brand KPIs. And so what I wanted to start with is to ask each of you about what you think about the primary KPIs for brands that are looking to invest specifically through retail media players. Is it mostly about traffic or sales lift? Do you believe, or have you seen that brand building is important, and to what extent? So Julie, let's get us kicked off here.
Well, thank you. And given I have the honor of speaking first, I feel compelled to say that this is the moment, guys. Like, the pandemic sucked in so many ways, but it did not for the growth of e-com. The traffic, the shopping growth, it's been accelerated at least 5 years due to the pandemic. And on top of that, we have cookie deprecation, increases in consumer privacy. So Rakuten sitting at the very intersection of as a shopping portal, working with retailers, working with brands directly and pushing traffic to retailers. This moment of first-party data partnerships in a post-cookie world is really, really interesting to us, and I think should be to everybody, since it revolutionizes how we have conversations with our consumers. From a KPI perspective, I think Rakuten, as pretty much everyone on this panel, works with a variety of brands, different verticals, different types of brands, different stages in the nascency of their brands. And that really is what depends how they use us and what they look for. So like an entrenched brand is coming to us looking for acquisition, for retention, for re-engagement, especially important coming out of COVID. Direct to consumer, smaller brands looking more for discovery, acquisition, brand building. And then we work with new verticals that aren't kind of rewardable cash back, like financial services, who it's all about awareness and brand building. But I think more important than all of the variety of ways that brands wish to measure the impact of their campaigns with us, sales lift, very important. More important, how effective and efficient is that sale? A smart marketer is thinking about ROAS, is looking lifetime ROAS, even looking at average order value. How valuable is that customer? How valuable are they long term? So like LTV, lifetime value, also super important. And I'll say that the more advanced direct to consumer brands with whom we work, they want to base those KPIs also not on our data, but on their own data. So with new to file, what does new to file mean? Not new to file to our retail platform, but new to file to their CRM. And I think the cool thing is that a lot of brands who may be on this call today, like CPG brands who have not had access to that level of consumer data, this movement of retail media is going to give them much more access into who is purchasing their products, and allow them to build that sort of more complex CRM file so that they can look at not only sales, but the effectiveness of the channel and the partners with whom they work.
That's a great start. Thanks for kicking us off on the retail side. So, Dan, I was hoping you could offer your perspective from the agency world, working with lots of different major brands, and how they might be, and you all might be thinking about this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I completely agree with Julie. There's so much that's changed from consumer behavior that has really accelerated why retail media really is having a moment right now. I mean, let's be honest, it's not like retail media just appeared or just suddenly became important. It has been there and it has been important. And it's been important for even longer than digital media has been important, right? Shopper marketing is extremely important, always has been, always will be. I think at the end of the day, any CPG company, when I worked at L'Oreal on the brand side, and I'm sure Matt could tell you, anyone else, when you're talking to the GMs and presidents of brands, their number one KPI is how much are we selling? There's so many other things that they're trying to do, but at the end of the day, it's how much are we selling? And especially if you're talking about the CPG category, where the majority for most of them is being sold in stores, they don't have that very direct insight, like Julie also mentioned, and that's really a challenge. So one of the ways that our clients and clients that I've had in the past or at L'Oreal that you need to address that is you need to have people thinking about your product. You need to have people aware and not, you know, what funnel are you in, mister? Can I put you in that funnel and see if I've moved you along in that KPI? It's making sure we're hitting all of those things at all times. So branding, even while we care, number one, about how are we driving the fundamental business success for our clients, and we know that ultimately the clients that they have internally that they're reporting to are thinking about sales, all of those other things are really important in terms of awareness, consideration, and really knowing why your product is important and they should think about it, whether they're in the store looking at a shelf and trying to decide on a specific type of product they know they need to pick up, or if they're online shopping for that product to get shipped to their home or to be able to pick up with curbside pickup. Now that part I think is pretty new. I think the part of it that's maybe flipping on its head a little bit more, and the more that we have these great opportunities with really strong retail media networks, and the more they are better able to corral and marshal the resources of all the data that they have internally, which, by the way, is app tracking transparency compliant, it's CCPA compliant because it's not shared data. It's all extremely important. It's an opportunity for brands to go in and build branding as well. Even though in the past we've seen a lot more that you want to get the right audience when they're shopping because they're in the shopping mindset. Just because they're shopping for one product at that time doesn't mean that it's actually a really great time to get them aware of other products they may not have considered, or start to consider products that they may have heard of, but they didn't really know what it was. Maybe they'd heard the brand name because they've seen ads on YouTube, maybe out of home, which hopefully we'll all be seeing a lot more of. And this is the time that you can build up those other upper funnel metrics as well. I just think that because all of our clients and CPG companies, maybe even outside of CPG, are becoming more aware of how important it is to take advantage of the strength of data and the privacy safe, consumer respectful type of data that retailers have, that it will be used significantly more, not just to drive top line and bottom line success, but also to drive those stronger branding metrics as well.
Thank you, Dan. So Matt, I was hoping maybe you could offer a perspective from Clorox that and how, the rise of retail media might be changing how you are thinking about KPIs specifically.
For us, it's a few things. National media is highly efficient. Trade is inefficient or unverified. So if we're going to grow our retailer media investment, it should come more from trade than national media. But we know that brand wants it all. And I think there's a sort of dichotomy and a hypocrisy to kind of what we want out of retailer media measurement. In theory, it's supposed to work that national media and brand building takes a little time. At the earliest, you should wait about 60 days. Then we look at brand lift via Upwave. We also look at sales lift via Nielsen MTA. And we have to tell that nuanced story, whether they correlate or not. But of course, the brand is ravenous for sales, short-term sales. So you have to be sort of a counterweight and remind them that brand building takes time, minimum 60 days, and then go from there.
Awesome. So, Michael, I wanted to bring you into the fray here and have you answer the question about KPIs, but maybe a little bit more specifically, when you're thinking about this idea of retail media data and then the measurement solutions, there's a question of there's the KPIs, but then there's a question of build versus buy, right? And so are you thinking about following the path of, do you think the way that this might be headed is following the path of, the social media platforms, or are you seeing demand for a third-party solution?
Yeah, I think this market's going to evolve in slightly different ways than we saw in the social media space. If you look at the social media space, while there are a number of different publishers that have come to dominate the space, we can count them all on one hand and we know all their names. When you look at the retail space, like I said, we work with over 100 retailers globally today. We work with upwards of 48 in just the United States. It's a fairly fragmented retail market. What that also means is that these companies are both fragmented, but they're also now technology companies by and large at their core. There are some notable exceptions to this, such as some very large marketplaces based in Seattle, but most retailers are in the business of selling goods, not developing underlying technology of attributing ad exposure to underlying product transactions. So what we've generally seen is for the vast majority of retailers, they're looking to lean on third-party technology companies to build out these capabilities for them. My company is one of those. There are many others in the space. And I think this has two benefits. One, for retailers, it gives them a quicker path to market in providing these capabilities. But the other thing to consider is, how do I really create standardization in terms of how these metrics are counted across a wide array of retailers? If I rewind back a few years ago in this space, I think almost like the social media companies, everyone was marking their own homework, had their own methodologies for measuring any variety of metrics, even down to attributed sales. It gets trickier than you might think. I think what you'll see with more technology standardization and with trade bodies like Media Ratings Council starting to come in and audit the space more and more, we're going to see a move towards greater standardization. We'll see some exceptions like the market behemoths out there, but by and large, I think we'll see better standardization in the space. We won't get there in the next 6 months, but over the next 1 to 2 years, I'd expect a definite path towards greater standardization.
And Julie, how are you guys thinking about this this topic? Are you building or buying in terms of measurement?
That's a great question. I mean, I think generally, because retail media players are largely targeting their own first-party data assets, it's a closed loop play. So in that way, it's really quite dissimilar from the likes of a social media platform. So I think to Michael's point, these environments like retail media, where you can truly measure lift, because it's a real outcome, it's a sale, it's something tangible, they could justify their own homegrown attribution methods rather than using a third party. It really isn't the same as grading your own homework in a more vanity metric driven platform. But the challenge is that this is not in the wheelhouse of most retailers from a service standpoint or from a technology standpoint. This is what's old is always new again, right? We've all been in this industry long enough to know that. And I think like the retail media in a lot of ways is like some beautiful progeny of co-op advertising and retail and retargeting. And in that way, it's not to say that any retailer doesn't know how to do those two things. They just don't exist in a service offering or in a SaaS kind of platform, which is what this is going to eventually have to become. So I would say that they're going to be challenged, as would we. Anyone will be challenged in building a practice that delivers performance insights and KPIs that hasn't been their primary business model. So I think most retailers will need to be thinking about how they do this, and it will likely mean that they have to lean on third-party entities for tech enablement like Criteo and measurement like Upwave. I think it's going to be really important.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about, this targeting being primarily first-party data, which sort of, I think, sparks a follow-up question, which would be, do you think retail media companies would be looking to expand beyond their own first-party data or their own property owned and operated ecosystems? And what do you think that might look like?
I mean, I think this is a must. And I think this is probably the most exciting part of all of this, is that retailers and retail platforms like Rakuten, we have all sorts of unique inventory that our brands and our shoppers engage with, that brands engage our shoppers with, like email or push notifications or the app, web, whatever. But the site frequency is only so high. It is one particular experience in the advertising funnel. So if we have the ability to extend that conversation to audiences, and I think that key here is that extend it on a well-curated third-party premium inventory network and continue that conversation. We absolutely should, because like, when has marketing not been about finding your consumer where they are, when it's always been the definition of what it is, right? So and then we get to lend that relationship that we have with our shoppers to our best brand partners elsewhere. And probably the coolest thing, because I have a background in CTV and television, having worked at Comcast, is that this opens a whole new world of being able to create a full funnel experience for a brand. Before, if a brand wanted to buy CTV, search, display, you have to work with these disparate partners and vendors to do so. And it's nearly, if not impossible, to tie together a full experience for the consumer, which is, at the end of the day, when we get talking about targeting and stuff, sometimes we don't talk enough about, is this the right consumer experience? And to be able to get relevant, personalized experiences in front of a consumer, from upper funnel like CTV all the way down to on-site advertising on a retailer that's driving a purchase, that is something that's a win-win-win for everyone. And I think something we haven't really been able to do before.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Michael, I think everyone here kind of knows how you would answer this question, but would love to get your thoughts on, you know, this idea of expanding beyond the retail property.
Yeah, I think it's almost an interesting framing of the question, because I actually think the majority of retail media spend, so to speak, is actually occurring off retailer sites today. You know, as a company, we're powering both what we call the on-site placements, what goes on the retail site, as well as what happens off the site. And I think we're going to see a 50-50 balance emerging over time, but they're both really important tools in the overall retail media playbook. Generally speaking, when I look at how brands are executing, they're leaning on this expanded offsite inventory for a couple reasons. One, to hit a lot of those more upper funnel objectives based upon a retailer's audience. And I think as third-party cookies go away, these audiences are really compatible with things like cohort targeting and aren't really at much risk as the underlying technology changes. So they're looking to use this for brand building, but then they're also looking at this as a way to drive additional incrementality. So going back to Matt's point about this tension of, hey, I need to build my brand, but also need to justify short-term sales results. What I'm seeing more and more out of the sophisticated brands is sometimes the stuff that looks worst from the ROAS perspective is actually what turns out to be best when you look at, hey, is this bringing new shoppers into my category? Is this getting people to convert from competitors' products? Is this driving new top line revenue that I wouldn't have got otherwise? And I think where these kind of audience extension or offsite advertising tactics play a big role is in achieving just that balance.
And if I may jump in, so I 100% agree. I think the flip side may also be true. Like you mentioned, Mike, you work with hundreds of retailers who definitely have very valuable inventory, and again, very valuable data, but they haven't been built up like some of those other companies that you alluded to that are tech companies and are collecting a lot of that data and know how to do that and have the in-house wherewithal to do so. There is so much that could be done if we do find a standardized type of cohort for targeting, cohort framework for targeting, for measurements. Obviously, other tech giants that aren't as much in the retail space have their own options for different kinds of cohorts that may or may not come to fruition next year. But I think that so much of what we can do, again, is potentially go in both directions. Use the data that retailers have about their own customers to find them outside of their own walls, but also find them across all the different places. So one thing that you'll see with a lot of CPG companies, yes, huge, what you would call first party data if they were all buying from you, right? You would take your CRM list of past purchasers, loyal purchasers, recent purchasers. There are those kinds of people that you've never seen them before. You don't know their name. You don't have their cookies or their mobile ad IDs or anything like that. If there were some way to get across the different retailers with a standardized format and to be able to see how you're moving that group of people along without any way of disaggregating and having those people individually identified in any way, that gives us an opportunity not just to have that offsite experience for those types of brand loyalists or new to brand, but to do it across these individual retailer sites. And I can tell you, I personally am very excited for not just what's happening with retail media technology, but also things like the different data warehouses. So like with Snowflake, for example, with the type of data sharing that's potentially enabled as cohort standards become a thing. I don't know how else to put it. That has applications really in the tech space and how different brands can share. And then some of those brands that have the most valuable information about customers, which, for CPG may very well be the retailers, will open up completely new ways of targeting without ever knowing that you're targeting that person, building that great experience, being able to see that you're doing well, optimizing that experience, and never violating the really important trust that we have with our consumers, whether they do or don't want to be targeted. That we simply, either way, we won't know, and there's no way that that data is coming out.
To me, it feels like retailer media is going through either an identity crisis or an identity assessment phase. Who do they want to become? Do they want to become a data provider, a measurement solution, a clean room partner? I think they're all kind of trying to evaluate that, and it's very driven by monetization. Where they land, it depends on their sort of openness versus being conservative. They could just become another unilateral walled garden, or they could become more open. I think Walmart's a big one there, kind of remains to be seen. In terms of O&O, look at Amazon. I mean, they've diversified into Twitch and OTT. I mean, they would be thrilled to be rebranded to deliver upper funnel. They'd rather you associate them with upper funnel at this point, probably, than lower funnel. They do that well already. But I think, Dan, you made the point, yeah, you're gonna have to look into new forms of reach, the sort of luxury of easy reach, switchers, brand loyalty, like that's over. We're gonna have to find new forays, new avenues into lower propensity reach, and we're gonna have to work a lot harder. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in that.
That's a great point, Matt. And I, as a brand, I wonder what your thoughts are on this idea of when leveraging retail media as a brand marketer, maybe trying to reach a certain audience or, drive a certain outcome. Do you believe that brands marketing via retail media are looking for, traditional or somewhat traditional types of measurement, like MTA, or do you think this is an important element in the media mix models? Like, how are you thinking about the verification aspect of all of this?
Well, ideally, it's not verified any differently from any other publisher that we consider. I'm getting a little tired of retailer media being seen as this hallowed separate thing, kind of like how social media was for a time. And then we started kind of fixating on vanity metrics. We want to move away from all that and bring retailer media into the sort of standard measurement ecosystem. I mean, they just, from an MMM standpoint, they just have to make it more feedable. Like, we need data by DMA by week. So if they want to be viewed and evaluated in the kind of same echelon as any other retailer, any other media publisher, then they're gonna have to do the work.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more. Philosophically, we want the comparisons to be apples to apples. Optimization for everybody, should be fair so that you can, as marketers, make the best decisions. So, so Michael, you know, do you think retail media players will end up staying in-house only, or will end up building these big networks of partners? And you know, so it kind of goes back to the question of first-party data. Like, you think they'll be like guarding that data, or providing a way to reach these audiences on these expanded networks?
Look, I think they're always going to be trying to extend that audience data elsewhere to find new monetization streams. I think the area where retailers will always be rightfully careful is around anytime you're exposing the underlying user identity or underlying transactional data associated with that user to any third party. They're going to jealously guard that. So, you know, to Matt's earlier point, I think they're all in the kind of this careful balancing act. When retailers hear, hey, we need you to look more standard and open up on measurement, they freak out. They say, hey, you're coming for our crown jewels, right? That user level transactional data. But I think oftentimes that's not what we actually mean. What we say is, hey, we want those media metrics to look exactly like what we get from other traditional publishers, but we're coming to you because you can add something additional on top of it in terms of that user level transactional data. So I think that's going to manifest itself in a couple ways going forward as they look to extend that data outward. First of all, like this concept of kind of clean rooms, or what some are calling like federated analytics, I think is going to become more and more prominent. We've seen technology companies like LiveRamp making investments in the space. All the big cloud providers are making major investments in the space. As Dan mentioned, companies like Snowflake in the analytics space are as well. And we'll see more and more actions by retailers say, hey, for my most valued brand partners, I'm going to allow them access to this data set, but I'm not going to allow them to really get that user level data, both for privacy reasons, as encoded by laws like CCPA, but also because of the underlying value of that data. And I think that's all, those techniques are also going to be used as they start to extend their media programs beyond their own walls into other sites by using things like cohort technology, coupled with these types of analytics techniques to say, hey, can I even build contextual targeting strategies that allow me to extend this audience even further? We just announced the other week, we're doing a number of different pilots in that space where we're building these very niche audiences and then building contextual indexing against them to help retailers expand that reach to something where it can really meet the scale requirements that a brand has to, get the efficiency Matt was talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree. Dan, what are some of your thoughts here on the topic from the agency perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all really great points. I mean, the contextual piece also, we've seen that in programmatic has been so huge. I mean, look how valuable Grape Shot was, right? For example, look how important Google's technology is for contextual data. That's a previous way that we were already identifying audiences in an extremely strong way, not just the audience, what the person is interested in, but what they're thinking about literally at the moment that you talk to them. You've been talking for years about reaching the right person with the right message at the right time. And a lot of the promises that have been made to brands about how we're going to achieve that have been really strong promises and have been really extremely difficult to execute. And I think right now personally, and I know this is, I think a lot of people feel this, but also just as a consumer, I think it's in a lot of ways, it's a really strong thing that we're having these conversations about privacy right now. And this is actually being enforced because we are forced to confront the reality that number one, if it's my data, if it's my information, it's my information. Just because you saw me, just because you got my credit card number, just because you gave me a 15-page end user license agreement and I signed it because it was for a 10-cent transaction, doesn't mean that you can actually do whatever you want with my data. But the reality was I have more than one phone. I have more than one computer. I'm a little nerdy, so I have more than one browser on each of my computers. So I've already had lots of different identities. I use a lot of Apple products, so a lot of those IDs well before app tracking transparency, right? With ITP on Firefox with ETP, I wasn't visible. You didn't know who I was, even when I transacted with you. You didn't know who I was in other places. Contextual was one of the ways that you could target me and get me to see something that I'm thinking about and that clearly I must in some way be interested in and reach me that way. When we can start to combine that level of contextual alignment, both off of retailer sites, but also within their individual networks, with audience data, including about me. If you know that I have a child, which I do, but you don't know that it's me, it's someone who has a young child, someone who lives in the suburbs, someone who drives a car, all of those different things, but doesn't have Dan Gross attached to it. There's so many opportunities to do those things. That combined with the strength of artificial intelligence and advertising, which we have been using, and with the cloud technology that both has the potential to open up the opportunities for really robust cohort-based measurement and targeting frameworks, but also to allow that really quick decisioning. There's a lot that we can do. I think, and I suspect personally that that's where a lot of this is going to head. When we have the power to do it, the computing power, which is no longer just a hardware, but a software solution that we have the data combined together. As these retailers find ways, the smaller retailers as well, to buy the technology that they need, this will allow us to do a lot of these different things. The one thing that we have to be careful, as always, is as the more we rely on artificial intelligence and machine learning to power a lot of this targeting, as long as we have those new checks and balances in place to make sure that we're accounting for a lot of the biases that we've started to see in the past. So I think there's a lot that's opening up, combining that contextual and that audience data, as well as the measurement, because the measurement is what we need for the AI and machine learning to work well. And then just be careful about the implications of what that is. But overall, I think that opens up so many different avenues, and a lot of it is based in this new conversation that we're having and based in the fact that retailers are realizing that they can do this, which, by the way, my personal opinion, doesn't mean that the retailers are no longer interested in selling things to people. And it doesn't mean that that's the entire shift that they want to make. I think both of them can coexist in a really strong way that's good for the consumer, good for advertisers like our clients, and really good for the ecosystem as well from a privacy perspective as well.
Thank you, Dan. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have the Q&A feature in the Zoom. So if you've got any questions, we've got about 5 or 10 minutes left of content. We could keep going, but if anybody who's attending wants to ask a question, we're happy to take them. So with that, I want to pivot slightly, and Julie, I wanted to sort of come back to this idea that brand, with the rise of retail media, it is possible that brands are already wary of the power that large retailers have on their business. And do you think retailers are now going to start to demand certain levels of media spend on their platforms to guarantee shelf space and positioning? Do you think these things will start to come together to start to increase leverage?
Yikes. No, I think digitally speaking, I don't see that as a concern at all, because there's vested interest in both parties to make the media work to drive more sales. That's the intention of everybody here. So, I mean, retailers already use merchandising techniques to position brands, items in front of the people who will most likely buy them, and personalization will, continue to advance and proliferate, making that even more common. And the only reason I guess I see media impacting additional merchandising is that it will further the likelihood of the sale. But again, that's a win-win for everyone. The concern that if the media, doesn't work and we just have to buy it anyway to secure ourselves a spot on the digital shelf, that doesn't make any sense to me, because when media isn't proven to work, brands won't buy it. and there's no incentive for the retailer to waste ad space or valuable consumer patience or eyeballs on ineffective media that they clearly don't want. So no, I don't think that's the concern. I think there are other concerns, though. I think that we should definitely be paying attention to the likelihood that retail media disproportionately helps larger brands versus smaller brands, just as a byproduct of the fact that it's easier to sell things people already buy and that they're aware of. So I think that could create a bit of an uneven playing field for smaller brands who don't have the traffic or the budget to compete. But at least at Rakuten, we really believe in brand diversification. Our CEO says it every day that if there is a product or a brand that even one person buys, we want them on our platform because we want to be there for everything, anything anybody wants, right? And targeting is the right answer to help for that. So you don't have to blast the same message to everyone. You decide who is the most likely buyer of direct-to-consumer brand A and develop a really clever targeting mechanism, both on-site and site and off-site, to drive traffic to that brand or to that store. And perhaps the largest brand issue, I think, as these partnerships expand from a retailer power standpoint, is the concern that they're producing competing products. So brands may want to think about that. They might want to think about working with a partner who exists not to compete, but rather to make them successful as we form these closer reliances on one another.
Love that. I think that's going to calm everybody's nerves. Matt, what do you think? You still got some fear around this? You buying this?
My short answer is, I mean, I'm definitely concerned. It's not even a concern. It's already a reality.
Yep.
I think we've kind of gone from fine line between entitled versus earned, and I think entitled is outpacing earned. It was a big growth year for Clorox, and going to be hard to lap next year. We've seen a ballooning growth in retailer media spend. So, I mean, we might even have to work on some preemptive messaging to just manage expectations. We can't grow our retailer media spend at nearly the same pace as we did in the last year, but they will be expecting it. So I think I'm more concerned than Julie.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I share Matt's concern. I mean, I think this is already happening by and large today. I think the real question right now for much of the retail media ecosystem is retail media spend going to be an extension of kind of traditional merchant vendor relationships where it's basically negotiated as part of the margin consideration around products? Or do these things evolve to look more and more like true media companies where, look, you've got to earn yourself amongst a lot of equal competitors that are fighting for every single dollar. I think retailers are stuck in the middle there. And for a lot of the arguments that Julie laid out, I think it makes sense long-term for retailers to move in the direction of treating these things more like media practices. It will result in a better consumer experience, better long-term investment from the brand, and a much more sustainable business model. But in a world where every retailer looked at what happened in 2020 and said, well, the gravy train I was living on and in-store promotions now has to move digital. How do I get my piece of that? We're at kind of an inflection point where the dramatic shift we saw in e-commerce last year changed that calculus and probably pushed us a little more towards the trade and merchandising side of the equation rather than the media side of the equation. But I expect that power balance to swing back over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great point about, what the pandemic has done to retail in general. And, it's been said that it's moved the technology, it's advanced the technology, accelerated it 10 years. And We've actually got a question from somebody attending that I think is a nice segue here with this theme of sort of change. And the question is that, much of retail media in the past has been dedicated towards sponsored search results. So I'll throw this out to the group. How have you seen more traditional branding tactics impact these search investments, if at all?
I can jump in here. So this has been, I think this is also something, an old conversation made new again. Search has been under attack and was, on its deathbed for, I don't know how many decades at this point now. Is display gonna mean that people aren't spending on search? Is digital video gonna mean that people aren't gonna spend on search? Is actually Amazon's retail media mean that people aren't going to spend on search? And now Amazon thinks of itself as, and is finding itself in some cases into brand search budgets. It's just called part of their search budget is in these other platforms. So my personal view, I see our clients continue to spend heavily in search. As long as people are searching, you're going to need to spend the money to make sure you maintain your share of voice. We talk about, the risk to small brands. The large brands also have a risk that they also need to think about, and they usually do think about, which is maintaining their advantage that they have right now. It's not a negative thing. They don't want people to hear about different kinds of brands at all. In fact, you see a lot of the very large CPGs investing in small CPGs that can create really exciting new products for consumers. But in order to maintain that P&L and continue to grow year over year, as every brand within every large CPG company is expected to do, you need to maintain share of voice. I think unless people actually start spending less time in search, stop searching, which is possible. There are different ways to get the information that you need these days. But I don't think brands are going to say that they can afford to really significantly decrease that search investment, because it will come at such a cost in terms of brand maintenance, even if not in terms of brand building.
Well, search definitely as a channel, I totally agree. But search on a retailer site being something that is a ability to be leveraged on behalf of a brand is one of the coolest things in my mind. Like, there should be a movement of dollars in that direction to a partner who has, high propensity in market shopping data that can help target those search results in a more efficient and effective way than traditional search mechanisms.
Yeah, I agree. And, search is just it's an interesting one, right? Because the act of searching is a signal of intent, right? But it's also an outcome of potentially of branding. So yeah, I love the death of search for the last 20 years. Hadn't heard that one. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left. Another question from the audience I'll just throw out to you guys generally. And it's probably good to do somewhat of a wrap up by looking forward a little bit. So what do you all think the biggest difference in retailer purchasing over the next 3 to 5 years will look like versus today, right? So I think it's like what we're doing is we're trying to look at the retail, but then also kind of the shopping behaviors. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say that maybe it's not 3 to 5 years, but I think within the next year or two, we've got this thing that we call internally revenge shopping that we think is going to start happening, where like everyone hasn't bought those super cute handbags or high heel shoes or luxury goods over the past year. And I think over the next year or so, revenge shopping is going to be a super big deal, and I'm excited for it. And just generally the future state of retail, I think the direct to consumer brand proliferation over the past couple of years has been absolutely fascinating. I think it's pushing traditional brands and retailers to have to become much more data enabled and thoughtful about their marketing campaigns and capabilities. And it's not an island. You see these big direct-to-consumer brands like Glossier and others being sold in retailer stores now. There will never be a lack of need or desire on behalf of shoppers to have an aggregated shopping experience, whether that is digital or in store. But I think that definitely changes the way that retailers need to be thinking about their product lines, their offerings, ability to support smaller, more nascent brands, and do so in a way that creates more of a consumer experience, an experiential moment, which is something that I think younger shoppers are really looking for.
Agree. Like shopping experiences have to change. Consumers, if you're going to mobilize your whole family out of your house, you're going to want a predictive, more personalized experience in store. But I do believe that people need to leave their house, get the kids out of the house, spend some leisure time in the Target toy aisle. Like, it's great for my kids. But I do think there will be a more sort of expectation of a curated, personalized experience.
I love that. One takeaway from this panel is leave the house. Well, it is interesting that we've made it this far, and D2C is only just now coming up. Do you guys have thoughts on brands that are aggressively pushing into D2C subscriptions? Are retailers going to view this as a direct threat, or just take it in stride because we accept the changing consumer habits?
Well, I would certainly love to hear what Julie thinks about it, for sure, working at a retailer. But I can say from our clients who do very robust D2C businesses, and we have a few of them, really, really strong relationships with their retailer partners. They continue to have co-op investments. They continue to have brand funded investments that lead to the retailer websites. None of that has changed. I mean, of course, you may see a little change in one direction or another as people change the way that they shop and where they buy these things. But at the end of the day, if you're building a brand and you're getting larger, especially if you get people to buy D2C who maybe weren't buying at the retailers before, then it can absolutely be a win-win. And then because you had that strong relationship with that advertiser, you have all these new ways to prove to the advertiser that advertising within your own media network or using the data that you have in a privacy safe way helps to build that brand. You continue to see that this can be a really mutually advantageous situation for both advertiser and retailer / publisher, if you want to call it that way, or even just for retailers.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, digital media and advertising has always functioned best as a big tent, and there is room for everyone in that tent. Jump on in, the water's warm. Consumers, like I said, will always look for an aggregated shopping experience, and it's evidenced by many direct-to-consumer, some of the earliest direct-to-consumer brands. They still have their great D2C practice, but they also work with a variety of retailers. So I just see this as great benefit. It's a rising tide. And I think this is really just an opportunity that a lot of these direct-to-consumer brands have opened the door to other more traditional brands understanding what they can do from a direct-to-consumer standpoint that will help them build and curate their data assets to deliver a much more personalized, much better experience to consumers.
I do wonder if there emerges something that looks more like a middle path, though, as more and more retailers build marketplace sides of their business. And you look at marketplaces like Amazon, you have a number of brands who operate not as first-party vendors, but as third-party sellers within that marketplace, taking advantage of the aggregation of shoppers that an Amazon would provide, but getting more control over pricing, data, positioning of their products than they would in a traditional retail environment. As more and more traditional omnichannel retailers build out their own marketplace channels, largely to increase assortment today, it will be interesting to see how the evolution of their relationship with the brand changes as brands say maybe what they're learning from other marketplaces and look to apply it through things that they've maybe more traditionally considered pure retail vendor channels.
I would say, yeah, it's a rising tide and it's a rising levy as well. We have to have a line of defense and a line of leverage. If we don't, it's an absolute necessity to figure out D2C. Granted, it's a lot of hard work, but it's necessary.
Well, I think that's a great topic to close on, and we're about at time here. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you, our panelists, for your really thoughtful and compelling responses and thoughts today. And thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us. We hope the session shed some light on retail media, the opportunities and the challenges that they present. And so for everybody in the audience, keep an eye out for the next Upwave event. We do Masters of Brand Measurement panels quarterly, and we do expert webinars monthly. If you're interested in hearing more about how you can leverage our brand intelligence platform, please feel free to reach out to us at upwave.com or send us an email at sales@upwave.com. Thanks, everybody.